Greetings and salutations. Welcome to 360 Info Network, sponsored by the Cleveland Observer. We are pleased to bring this new partnership with our publication partner, the Cleveland Observer, and we're happy to welcome aboard Mr. Ron Calhoun, who is the founder and the creator of the Cleveland Observer. So we'll be getting into more about this as we have our conversation with him. But right now, we'd like to welcome aboard the creator and the founder of 360 Info Network, Brother Hamtonio, also known as Lynn Hampton. Brother Hamtonio.
Yes, welcome, everyone. African proverb states the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people. And that's very important when it comes to our African American community, our homes. That's where community starts, right in our homes. And the question is, like I always used to open up, is what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. And what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told. So the question is, what have you been told? So we got a great show for you today. Sun is shining. And we got our good brother Vince in the remote studio. So what's going on, Vince, for today?
Well, we have two very wonderful guests with us today. As I mentioned earlier, we have Brother Ron Calhoun, who is the creator and the founder of the Cleveland Observer newspaper. And as I said before, we have a great sponsorship that is being facilitated by them. So we are very grateful to have them aboard as broadcast partners. So without any further ado, let's welcome to our stage Brother Ron Calhoun. Ron, how are you today?
I am doing wonderful, Vince, and thank you for having me.
Hmm.
Yes. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, we've had a couple of conversations on 360 Info Network in the past. I can remember being in Cincinnati doing a remote broadcast from there because my nephew was graduating from the University of Miami. And we had a great conversation on that day. So, again, it's a pleasure to reconnect with you. One of the things that I wanted to do with our broadcast today is just basically connect you to our listening audience and right off the bat give you an opportunity to talk about what the Cleveland Observer newspaper is, what your mission and values are, and what value you provide to Cleveland beyond what the other publications are doing.
Well, Vince, let me start off by saying again, thank you. And the Cleveland Observer was birthed out of really establishing continuity between the information and resources that are all over the city. Yet there was really no way to bridge how people can get to those resources and information. Plus, we wanted to make sure that all the voices inside of the city were getting heard. You know, we are known for not being amplified. We are known for being misrepresented, and in some cases underrepresented in news. So we wanted to reflect on stories that were uh, showing how Cleveland is resilient and some of the challenges and how it has progressed towards some of the solutions with many people in the community that is really grassroots and putting forth a avocado what I want to say is uh, they're in the trenches doing the work and nobody knows about it. And we want to amplify that.
Right. So you talked about solution oriented, and I know a lot of the publications talk about problems, but they don't necessarily talk about solutions. Can you talk about how you go about amplifying solutions as opposed to just talking about the problems?
Well, we can always talk about problems, but we really can't in most cases, if we don't know what a solution is, that's the result. We talk about the problem. So we take it a little bit different. If we can take it from a journalistic perspective and find where these same problems are somewhere else, and then provide or integrate those solutions within our journalism, now it gives our community the empowering power to actually change. And that's our gist. That is our focus. How do we create empowerment so that we can have positive change?
Hmm. Can you talk about, and I know we want to talk about solutions, but can you talk about what you consider to be the most significant challenges facing Cleveland right now?
I think that the most significant problem right now is strong, effective leadership. And when I say that, who really cares about the community? You know, it's not just a job. It's not just status quo. It's not just uh, creating frustration within the community because people have taken the have gone on the back burner. They've thrown up their hands. They're frustrated because they don't see the change. And I think that's the best way for us to grow here in Cleveland is good leadership.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you would point that out. And I use this as an example when I look back at the council presidency of George Forbes. And one of the things that disturbs me about that dynamic is the fact that during the whole time that he was there, he never really groomed anyone to take his place. And then he had this idea that he wanted to be mayor. And that was really the death knell for him because, there were other folks that, did not really take a beautiful view of his council presidency and worked against him in order to take that office. So when we look at leadership in this town, we're looking at a lot of people who are manipulated by others. You have a certain cadre of elites or wealthy people who, in some cases, they control both sides. So if we look back at the last mayoral election, the same people who purchased Kevin Kelly purchased Justin Bibb. So they had both horses running in the race. So it didn't really matter who got elected, they would still get their way. And I think that speaks to one of the issues that we have with leadership, because in many cases, leadership is bought and paid for, and agendas are facilitated as a result of that. I want to ask my broadcast partner, Lynn Hampton, if you have any observations or any thoughts about what we just shared.
Yes, I do. I'm glad you let me chime in right at that point. When we're talking about leadership, I think, well, some of the problems that always happen in Cleveland is, like you just said, is passing the baton. And what I mean by that is usually the outgoing council person already have somebody who's groomed. And a lot of times that person may not be known as much to the community. And they just hand them off and they endorse them. And then we usually vote for them. Now, I believe, I forget which, it might be Dr. Umar or one of the other scholar friends. It might even been Kaba Kamene. That talks about we should be grooming people that we see in our everyday lives working the community. They're from the community. Just take Barack Obama for example. What he was working in the community before he moved up the ladder. People got a chance to see him, know him, and therefore he was able to move up, and people understood, at least in Chicago, what he was and what he was about. So I think a lot of times in the past, from what I remember, we didn't know a lot of the people that the outgoing council person handed the baton to. Where was the work at in the community? What was you doing? Did I see you? Were you hitting the streets and things of that nature? So I think far as good leadership should be taken from people that we've seen over the years working in the community hard, and then hopefully they stay on that trajectory far as when they actually get into office. So I think far as good leadership is concerned, that would be helpful if we knew that person, had a long-standing relationship with that person before we actually elected them in a position.
Well, I'd like to add to that there is a certain strategy in grooming someone as a council person to replace you. And I think what's important is that when you groom that person, you also connect them to the relationships that enabled you to be effective in your council leadership.
Sure.
It's one thing to just have somebody handpicked so that they can take over your 80,000 plus a year job. It's another thing to hand the baton off to someone who is connected to the very same people that allowed you to facilitate certain projects and development, economic development, community development, and all the other things that are important in terms of being an effective leadership. Ron, what are your observations about that?
Wow, you both of you touched on a lot of different areas, and first I want to say I'm glad the show started off with the family. It starts in the family, and I get that part of it, and I kind of overlooked that when you asked the question. But let's backtrack a little bit. You mentioned George Forbes. During that time when George Forbes was the council president, you have to look at the narrative, and media created this narrative about him. But at that time, that's what we needed. If you remember, Cleveland was labeled the best location in the neighborhood during all that turmoil, all that tension. So the bickering and the fighting and trying to get the agendas during that time frame, it created a competitiveness that made us the best location in the nation. So I have to be you have to be real careful about the narrative around Mr. Forbes. The other thing is you got to give him a little grace because he was thrown into the middle of something that probably he was learning on the job. And the third thing I wanted to bring up is he probably inspired a lot of folks. I mean, look at who came after him: the Mike Whites, the Jeff Johnsons, the all of the different people that came. If you think about it, back then we weren't that prominent in the political situation. So I'd like to give him a little grace and just applaud him for his work. The other thing I wanted to bring out is that this, you're right. The critical part of this was how do you mentor somebody and bring them into the fold without them having to learn all of this on the fly. Most of the council people that come in right now, they don't really know what the political processes are, what the charter says, and frankly, I don't even think they give them any training, which is something the council should look at. You bring in somebody new that wants to do all these things, and then they find out that there's a process and there's these agendas, and they have to. The bottom line is, in particular with Cleveland right now, you got to get 8 votes. And if you don't work with your fellow council people, you don't get those 8 votes. You don't get anything done. So you're absolutely right. It starts in the home, and it starts by being inspired, and it starts actually the finishing touches of it is that mentorship. How do we build more resources? I'm saying not intellectually, but personal resources to get into that political arena and be effective.
Yeah. And all I'm saying, and all those things are correct and good, yeah, for sure. But I'm just adding to that. The community should know that protege that is coming behind. That person should already been working in the community, known in the community, and trusted by the community for the deeds that they've been doing all along while they're being mentored. You know, it shouldn't be somebody totally green, somebody that even ain't been in the city that long. You know, their work should be known in the community. Then, you know, then you process and mentor them. That's what, you know what I'm saying? It should be both of them, in my opinion.
And to add to what you're saying, Brother Hamtonio, I think that grassroots connection is really important, because when you have someone who is working in the community, then they have an awareness of the people who are in that community, and they have a good relationship with them so that they can serve their interests. So absolutely 100% agree with you on that level. And two, I didn't want to take anything away from what Mr. Forbes did when he was in his situation, because you were absolutely right. He did a lot for the city of Cleveland. And then when Mike White was when he was mayor of the city, he did a lot. I mean, the house that I live in right now, I live in thanks to what Mayor White did. I was able to get a 15-year property tax abatement. I was able to get a house that was affordable and in a decent neighborhood where I'm surrounded by folks who have a homeowners association. So there was a lot of good that came out of leadership. So please don't misunderstand. I'm not taking anything away from the leadership that we had, because it was quite effective leadership. And there are still people today who talk about those eras, the Mike White, you know, the George Forbes. And what's really interesting, and I had the occasion to go to an event where Mike White and George Forbes were actually there together sitting at the same table. And I guess they had mended their fences and have become allies as opposed to being enemies. Because I'm sure you may remember, Ron, that it was Mike White that stepped away from George Forbes and it ran against a council candidate that George Forbes had endorsed. So that was kind of the beginning of the rift, you know. But again, years later, they have come together. I want to shift gears, Ron, and talk to you about something that is having a tremendous impact on the ability of our people to show up at the polls and being a publication. And I really like the fact that when you click on that link, the story gets read to you. So if you have, you know, deficits in terms of being able to read, you can at least hear the story and get the same information. But I want to talk to you about the impact of literacy or illiteracy in our community and some of the things that we can do to fight against that so that we have a more informed voter base. You know, one of the things that happens in many elections is that you walk into the polling place and someone hands you a card and it's got this slate of candidates and everybody that you're supposed to vote for, but you haven't done any homework. You don't know what their positions are. You just vote for them because they're in a particular party, but they don't necessarily represent your interests, which is why a sister who was running for judge against someone who has no judicial experience loses an election because she's on the wrong side of the card. Any comments about that?
Well, first, you're absolutely right. Educating and informing the community is key, um, and I think it's key because we have to do what a lot of grassroots organizations have really stolen from our initial. If you remember back in the '60s with the civil rights movement, that was the format. That was the guide, and a lot of different the LGBT community, even the new mega community is taking pointers from that strategy, and I think we should do the same thing. We should start eliminating this indoctrination that has happened to our culture and to our community by first of all focusing down to the younger adults. If we could get our message and get our experience and our knowledge, bridge that gap between the older generation and the younger generation and start building that up now, we could have a tremendous effect later on. I think that's, and that's the heart and soul of the Cleveland Observer. If we could connect with that younger, I mean, the younger demographic has the energy. They know the technology. They embrace the technology. Uh, we just have to bridge that gap, and that to me is the solution.
Yeah, I think it really is a major mission. And I think here at 360 Info Network, we're confronted by the same issue because a lot of the folks who are listening to us right now, who may be tuned in on YouTube or might be listening to us on their old fashioned AM radio, are part of that legacy that the young folks are going to have to assume at some point in time. So I want to ask my broadcast partner, Brother Hamtonio, what are your thoughts about the importance of connecting with our younger population?
Well, it's very important. It's an old saying that the young ones, as Brother Ron say, have the energy, and the older people in your community have the wisdom. That's why they call it a community. There's no kind of separatism in there. During our cultures, we was always communal, and we always invited, the young ones to partake in that. And when you sever that relationship, you got a community that is spiraling down. In my opinion, due to my past occupation, I believe what hindered and what was a major factor in that separation from from when we had it in the past, like in the '60s, was drugs. I think the drugs in the community kind of separated. I remember when crack came on the scene, and a lot of the older people in our community, became addicted to drugs, and it kind of lost that respect for the younger generation, and it became a gap when you had older people selling their cars, to to drug dealers and just looking, you know how they was looking on the streets and things of that nature. So I'm saying that was a contributing factor of that separation, and it wasn't intergenerational our community, but that is the key factor. It is the key factor, and that also comes with a culture, and that I believe that's one of the major issues in our community is that a lack of common culture, and I believe that's the glue that everybody else have that we don't have is our own culture. We have what Dr. Amos Wilson say, we have a reactionary culture, a culture that is based on how the system has treated us. So we kind of hodgepodge a system together that worked for us, because we in survival mode. So it worked for us and things of that nature. But we get back to what, like I stated before, the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of his people. If we start channeling those energies and getting that together, then we branch off and connect with other families. And that's what starts a community, because you all work together, in tandem for one cause and a purpose. So, but the youth play a tremendous part of that.
So, Brother Antonio, you talked about your previous occupation, and for those who don't know, you were some characterize it as a peace officer, some say police officer, but the bottom line is that you were tied to the public safety paradigm. And when you talk about reaction, and we look around our community, many times the police are called to respond to or react to something that has happened. I want to open up the conversation a little bit, and I know we're going to have Brother Ron with us for just a few more moments, but I want to open up the conversation and talk about public safety in our community. When you look at our budget, the predominance of the money goes to public safety. Just like on a national level, a lot of the money goes towards our military, and the citizens of this nation and the citizens of these cities pay taxes, and a lot of the tax money goes into public safety. But it just so happens that I'm an advocate for the arts, and we've identified racism as a public health crisis. And I don't happen to believe that the answer to the racism and the public health crisis that exists as a result of that is hiring more police officers. I think that we should have a certain amount in the budget of our city that is allocated towards the arts. I know that from what I'm told, there's a sevenfold return for every dollar that's spent on the arts. And when you go back to the pandemic and you see that the economy was supported by $500 million generated by the arts, if we take this seriously and we start appropriating dollars for the arts, we will see an increase in the healing that exists as a result of that racism. And we'll see an increase in the economic stability. And it's more than just about having a stadium downtown and folks coming down to watch people beat up each other. It's about doing things that facilitate the healing process in those who observe and take in the arts. Your thoughts, Ron?
Well, you hit the nail on. I mean, this thing is really starts off with healing. And I think arts is a way for people, in particular young folks, to heal, because look at what they've been through. They've been through an education system that has failed them. They've been through a family structure that has failed them. They don't know where to turn. And you have to heal. So that's a key point. And if the arts, music, entertainment is a way for us to get them to heal, that's fine. Let's do that. And I believe that the budget in terms of safety is appropriate, but I think safety really starts at home. And if we as a community, I'm going to take it all the way down to my street. If I know I have a drug dealer on my street, if I know I have unruly kids on my street, if I know I have whatever the situation is on my street, why am I so afraid that I don't speak up? And what's the coined word? Snitches get stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, where did that come from? Because that was the first erosion of the family and the community, because a community would not stand for any of those things.
That's
A
right.
family had the support of the community. The men in the community would say, okay, man, you can't do the drugs here. I remember I lived on 105 most of my life. And as long as that stuff stayed on 105, it was okay. But when it came down on Somerset, oh, we had a problem. So now you destroy the community, and one of the main things you spoke about, the drugs. The other main thing that destroyed the continuity in the community was busing. You took the kids and put them on another side of town. Now you know how competitive it was back then. Glenville against East High against John Hay, and each community, uh, although it was a competitive spirit, it never turned into violence. And once you took the kid and their loyalty and their community away from the community, that helped destroy it. So when you look at drugs, when you look at the busing, and you look at the even how much they've given in terms of support for the single family homes, welfare. When you look at all these pieces that have destroyed our community, we got to heal. And it comes back to, how do we heal?
I guess the question is, I want you to continue on it. Is it purposeful? Was that done purposeful?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I believe it. I mean, and when you get to 70 years old, you realize a lot of this stuff that you thought was normal was really systemic. It was put in place for us to be where we are today. Now we're talking a whole nother conversation now. We're talking about the black folks being on the peripheral now, and they're doing it on purpose. And that's a whole nother conversation. You know, we got a lot of folks in our society right now that are pissed off because they're learning what we've been going through.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Well, Ron, we've had you for a whole 28 minutes. And I know that you wanted to limit your time, but I'm inviting you to share with us some of the young folk who are working with you on your staff and on the board, and we'll bring them back and we'll have a continued conversation. One of the things that we probably could have talked about was education, because you mentioned busing and you mentioned the competition between the schools, and I know that there have been several changes in our educational institutions, and one of the things that is happening is that they are being affected by cutbacks in funding, which they're causing them to have to close schools and discontinue programs. And there's a lot of outreach that's happening from outside of the community into the schools. And when they cut the funding, they cut off the benefits that are provided to those who come into the schools and educate them about music, educate them about art, educate them about voting and other things that are beneficial to students, so that they get more than just the reading, writing, arithmetic, the STEM stuff, without the A that requires STEAM to be in these schools. So again, I thank you for joining us today. We're going to step away for a few moments, and then we are going to come back with our next guest, who happens to be Ephraim Abdullah. We're going to talk about the African American Museum. We're going to talk about Africa House International, and we're going to talk about Superior Renaissance Community Development Corporation. I don't know if you've been down Superior, but there's a spanking brand new building that's a residential property. And I think, and Brother Ephraim will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it happened as a result of the efforts of the CDC. So thank you for joining us, Ron.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to working and continue. And that face that I want you to bring in here is Devin Jones. Great young adult that has his head on right, has done his homework in terms of being credentialed from Case Western Reserve. I'd love to get him on the show, and anytime you want him, you just let me know.
Okay, well, we're definitely going to bring him aboard as soon as our schedule permits us to do that. We'll look at sometime within the next month, perhaps as soon as 2 weeks from now, we can make that happen based on his schedule. But again, thanks for joining us, Ron.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
All righty.
Cleveland has stories worth telling and voices that deserve to be heard. That's why the Cleveland Observer is proud to sponsor 360 Info Network with Vince Robinson and Antonio on AM 1490 WERE, where truth, culture, and conversation come together. Each week, host Vince Robinson and Antonio open the door to powerful discussions, from the arts and community history to the issues shaping our neighborhoods today. And the Cleveland Observer is right there with them, shining a light on the people and movements building a stronger Cleveland. Tune in to 360 Info Network and visit cleobserver.com to read, watch, and share more stories that inform, inspire, and unite our community. Because together, we are Cleveland's voice.
Welcome back to 360 Info Network, and welcome aboard Mr. Ephraim Abdullah. As I indicated before we took this break, he's involved with Africa House International. There was a Harvest Festival last Sunday that I was privileged to participate in as a musician, so I got a chance to connect with our dear sister Akusika over there. Brother Ephraim is also connected with the African American Museum. And as I said before, he is connected to Superior Renaissance Community Development Corporation. So we thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network. How you doing today, bro?
Hey, what's up?
Hey, well, the things that you are involved in are what's up. You know, there is a strong community connection to all of the things that you are doing. And I know that Brother Antonio is partnered with Francis Caldwell over there at the museum and does a lot to promote what they are doing over there, because, you know, that is an institution that is directly connected to our culture and our stability. You know, if we didn't have an institution like that, you know, there would be a deficit in the cultural experience here in Cleveland, because you do things to bring folks in that have relevant information and definite connection to culture. So kudos to you for being a participant in that. Let's talk about Africa House International first. Can you talk about what it is and what it does for Cleveland?
So, Africa House International is an organization founded by NASA astrophysicist Dr. Willie R. Mackey and his wife, Akusika and Como Mackey. Their work culturally in the community has presented our communities with connectivity to the motherland, or should I say African countries, many of them. So being able to reconnect to those cultures from those different countries and meet residents or people from those countries, learning drumming and, you know, the things that bring you into the culture, eating the food, having the conversation, getting into the mindset, sharing the spirit. Those are all positive attributes to helping Americans find their nature. You know, first thing is getting decolonized, and then second thing, finding your culture. You know, one of the things I was blessed with, my father was from the Nation of Islam, brought me into, I was born into the Nation of Islam, but my father brought the bean pie to Cleveland. He was the original bean pie maker in Cleveland. And he came with the first ministers of Islam here from the Nation of Islam in Cleveland, Minister Tariq Hamza. So my father actually went to Chicago and learned from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that bean pie recipe. And that's a recipe from God. So it's a blessing to be here and be able to connect with Akusika and Como Mackey. And she shared with me the history and the legacy of Africa House International.
Okay, talk to us about some of the programs that they're facilitating over there in that space.
So I did upload a video over the weekend. We had what we call the Harvest Fest, and we teamed up with some of our partners, the Western Reserve Conservancy, Land Conservancy. They brought in partners like the Cavaliers. I popped up a video there. I don't know if you're able to play them. It's called Starlux on the list, but it shows a brief synopsis of what we do environmentally at Africa House. We're environmental stewards. So our first thing is protecting the environment, learning the environment, reconnecting naturally back to the environment, a healthy environment. And these are things that are very important for people to realize. So what we ended up doing this weekend was planting trees. I'm not sure if you're able to play the video, but it's uploaded on your dashboard there.
Okay, give me a moment to get to that. I'm working on a few other things at the moment, but we can show that video and share some other information once we get to the second half of our show, and probably before then. But just bear with me. If you could continue to talk about the programs that you're facilitating at Africa House.
So yeah, we do. We have 3 programs that we are engaging with the community with. That's arts and culture, health and wellness, and education, which we use a STEAM approach for all of our programs. But at the same time, culture is really important as far as what we have identified with African Americans needing to realize that they have an original culture here on the earth that's connected to nature that they need to connect to. Now, of course, when it comes to the different countries like Senegal and Ghana and all the other countries in Africa, it's a plus to learn, and become globally connected to citizens from these countries. Like I sit on a Nigerian board, and I'm the only American on that board. And the thing is, being in that culture and doing events and having relationships and doing business with men from a high rank in Nigerian culture, it's such a energy, being connected to people that you're able to do business with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of that is important. I think that's one of the issues that and Vince would know, I always talk about reconnecting to our ancestors that have laid the groundwork down on how to live, what the purpose and role of a man, woman, child, how your community supposed to work for you and with you. And those things is already, those problems and those social issues have already been solved, and it's, I guess it's taken us this long to get back to that and understand that and see that, but we are bombarded by all this other information, from a European point of view that tends not to work for us in our best interest. Everybody, the Asians know how to, get along with each other, or at least have a common culture that they can either do business with or even settle their disputes if they have issues. But that culture gives them all those tools that they need to progress and move forward. What the purpose of a child, the role of a child, how to do business, and all of those things. That's where the culture brings you and gives you. And I think that's one of the main issues where we at as far as a community is concerned. And our good brother, I must say, our good brother Malcolm a long time ago talked about, the importance of teaching our own children, how you letting people that may not have your best interest teach your children. And I don't know why we still dealing with that particular issue. In the earlier segment, we talked about certain things as far as schooling and education is concerned, and right now we're crying about the possibility of them taking history out and books out of the community. We shouldn't, you know, we should see our vulnerability there of somebody having the control to wipe out our history that's being taught to our children. We should never let ourselves be in that type of position to where somebody else is responsible for feeding us, for educating us, for healing us, and doing economic business for us. When you're set up like that, you're set up for failure. You're set up for manipulation and things of that nature. So, I kind of hope this situation of where we're at right now in this country is a wake-up call for us, because we're still having issues with depending on somebody else, just like what you're going to get into yes, with the museum as well, and also with the cultural gardens. We shouldn't be sitting up here begging other people to fund our projects for us. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and if I could, I just want to interject and support exactly what you just said, Brother Antonio, because when you look at an entity like the Nation of Islam, it's based on the premise of self-sufficiency. And what you expressed about what Brother Malcolm said is extremely apropos. You cannot expect your oppressor to teach you the language of liberation. They're going to continue to keep you in an oppressed state so that they can continue to control and manipulate you and educate you in a way that is detrimental to you and not beneficial to you. So the wake-up call, the kick in the pants that we need right now is that, we got to take our lips off the nipple. That's what time it is. You got
I
to
don't
take
know
the
if I
lips.
want to take my lips off the nipple, man. I'm gonna just tell it like it is.
Well,
But
what I'm saying in a matter of speaking, and I wholly support the idea of breastfeeding, but the issue is, what nipple are we drinking from? And
right.
if you drinking from the nipple of a cow, you drinking from the wrong one, because that nipple is the one that's causing all the health problems, and that's a road that we can talk about at another point. But I want to shift gears and come back to something that you just shared with us, Brother Ephraim. And you said that you're sitting on a board and you're the only African American on a board with Nigerians. And one of the things that concerns me about our relationship to our African brothers and sisters in the Cleveland community is a lack of connection between our African brothers and sisters and the diasporan African brothers and sisters. Brother Antonio has facilitated gatherings at Voinovich Park and other places in the city, and it was billed as a cultural experience, an African and African American cultural experience. But the level of participation from the various African groups that exist, because they do exist, but they weren't participating in a level at which they should have been participating, because these events were designed to bring us together as a community. So as someone who is sitting on that board, I'm just wondering what your perspective is on the level of engagement that they have with the greater community of African Americans, because they are here, but the predominant population in this city is us. We're actually the majority population in this city, but we don't have that synergy. So could you shed some light on that and what your experience is operating in that sphere?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful concept there. Activity is the drive of anything that you're involved in, like minds, doing business with each other. One of the things, and I'm going to start off with what I heard Antonio say. He said something towards the fact that what I learned about culture. I've learned many relationships in many different cultures. Like, I have some really great relationships with white people, and I say it like that because I'm a businessman, And the thing that keeps my relationship healthy with the people that I associate with is that I know my business. So when I do business with these people, they are benefiting from the relationship that we have. Now, I have a relationship with a young lady named Jill. You all might know her from the CAC. She of the arts. So she and her staff has given Africa House the opportunity to leverage the use of grant funds to do our activities throughout the year. But if you don't keep up with the guidelines based on what's required in their contract, then the funds don't come, you know, and that's what happens in our community. A lot of times we got it's a majority Black people in Cleveland, but is a majority of Black people doing business, you know, and that's the reality. You know, a lot of people, when even some of your family, sometimes you see some of your family members coming that normally say, and they want to borrow a $5 here, a $50 there, or they only come when they want something. They don't never give nothing back. You don't want that relationship. You know, you want to be active, you know, and, you know, every time I think about the quality of what our people are doing in this city, I don't want to have to reflect back into my ancestor and make it a thought of yesterday. Who today is doing what our ancestors taught us to do, that we're able to illuminate their presence by being, you know? So a lot of people in our communities just haven't practiced doing the work. They're like college students. They know the theory of it. They went to school. They know the books of it. They know all of the answers, but they haven't started practicing. They haven't started doing any of the work. Now, I'm not saying that as a put down. I'm just saying, if you want the solution is do the work. You know, God knows you by the works of your hands, not by the works of your tongue. He don't want that tongue. He wants you to do that work. So a lot of our community issues are surrounded by people who haven't upgraded. You know, there's a digital divide, and haven't brought their mind into the new realization. A lot of people running from AI as if it's a plague. That's business. That's a tool to do business in. And if you don't bring yourself up to speed and keep current on what's really going on and actually engage and do something, nothing happens. And that's what happens in our community. We talk about we're philosophers. I would say we're philosophers. We know the answer. We see the answer. We can say the answer. We can sit here. We can have intellectual conversations. But that conversation only go but so far. What are you actually going to do? Are you actually doing things? Or are you talking about, yeah, I would like to see this, and all that wholesome goodness that come with the correct candidate answers, like you're running for office or something, you know, politicians, you know, we need leaders. We don't need politicians. We need people who are actually on the ground, who's actually doing the work. That's what you all was talking about with Mr. Calhoun. People who are actually doing the work, who actually engage with the community, that's actually doing something, and have real relationships and taking ownership of that relationship. Nigerians are very special people. They love doing good business. I couldn't stay in that circle if I didn't do good business with them. They will push me off, you know. So
let me add something in there. Let me say something. You know, with that, in a little bit to our defense, and both of you guys can comment on it, on this particular thing. The question would be, why? Why we respond, and like you say, don't do business, or more lip service than business than we ought to. Why? And that's where I try to always go to and ground myself in answering the question as of why is it like this way? Why do we work this way? And I always come back to culture, but also go back to consciousness. Consciousness. This dependence of on other folks' consciousness. We brought it up before. Is that stagnating us from moving forward? If you always have to depend on somebody else for your health, your education, your food, your economy, you're working, we left our kids in this position to where they still got to beg for jobs. We're not giving them no foundation to step out there on their own. So if you grew up all your life depending on somebody else to do something for you, the question I would be, could that contribute at all for your lack of a motivation to do something? And then, like, going back to what Vince always advocate and dealing with the motivation and the inspiration that comes from the culture and arts and things of that nature, we got other folks halfway controlling that as well. And we always on the bottom totem pole of all the funds and grant funds that we need to promote these particular events. Vince been advocating, for those state funds forever, and saying that we only get in every arena, we only get this much compared to everybody else funding their ethnic groups, their ethnic programs, their after school programs, and all of that type of stuff. So my question is, how much did that play into that road of our lack of involvement into business and moving forward and not just lip service?
I want to jump in and just reflect on some thoughts that I just had about culture with respect to Nigerians, because the Nigerians have a specific culture that they are tied to based on the nations that exist within the borders of that particular country. Just like in Ghana, you have a Khan, you have other different, I don't want to say tribes, but I'll say nations within a nation. And because there's a certain level of cultural integrity that exists with them, when you look at us, we have a fractured cultural identity because we really don't know who we are. We don't know if we're connected to Yoruba or Igbo or Fulani or any of the thousands of cultures that exist within the continent of Africa, which is comprised of 54 different countries. So I think I'm kind of answering my own question in the question that I posed to you. Brother Ephraim, you talked about the relationships around the context of business. And the reason that you're in that particular circle is because you come in prepared to conduct business, and their language is in business and not necessarily with creating a cultural connection to a people who don't have a real sense of cultural identity, except those of us who come together in the last week of the year to talk about the Nguzo Saba and talk about Kwanzaa. So I'm answering my own question, but I guess my hope and my concern is that somehow there can be some outreach so that we as disparate communities can come together and get a certain sense of sharing. So it would be great if the Nigerians could share a certain aspect of their culture so that we who don't have that sense of culture could create that connection that will enable us to have a view of ourselves that's connected. Because the truth of the matter is, some of us are descended from them. And the only way that we can create more of an awareness of that is if that outreach takes place. We're winding down in our radio broadcast. And so we're going to transition into the second half of the show, because we are definitely going to talk about not just Africa House International. And I'm going to give you a chance to share that video before the program ends. But I also want to talk to you about the African American Museum. And I'm really interested in talking to you about Superior Renaissance Community Development Corporation, because, again, it's really about doing and not just talking. One of the biggest deficits that we have is that we don't have a lot of involvement in CDCs. And some of the CDCs that we do have are basically representing the interests of Europeans and not necessarily representing our interests. And what developers do is they come in, they build stuff, they make their money, and they move on to the next project. And sometimes those projects, they languish, they don't flourish, but somebody got paid and it wasn't us. So you're listening to 360 Info Network on AM 1490 WERE with Brother Hamtonio and Vince Robinson. Our guest is Ephraim Abdullah. And as we've said, he's connected with 3 different entities. We're going to continue our conversation. We like to invite you to join us on our YouTube channels. Brother Hamtonio has a YouTube channel called The Journey with Hamtonio. Go to his channel, like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you get notified when he has different programs that he brings to you. Also, go to Vince Robinson on YouTube, and you can connect with me on that platform and check out some of the programs that I do on this radio program and other programs. Quickly, before we step away, Brother Ephraim, if you want to give some information on how folks can connect with Africa House International.
Yes. So we do have a website, africahouseinternational.org. I do have a media channel because I'm high in media called Wake TV on YouTube. The African American Museum, we're always fundraising. I also uploaded one of our current flyers that we're having a current event even for the next 2 Saturdays. Introducing people into Ghana and the Ivory Coast at the African American Museum. I also uploaded that on the link here as well. We all are 501c3, so we all do accept donations, please. You can donate to the AAMCLE. You can send Cash App, or you can go to the web, to our website and donate to the African American Museum, Cleveland, or africahouseinternational.org. That's pretty much what I have.
Okay. And if you could share those links with me via email or text message, I'll be sure to paste them into the description for this video so that people can actually just go to the video, click on the link, and get to those respective places. You know, it was a joy to perform at Africa House International last Sunday. We had a great time celebrating the marriage of our sister Ilanit. She just married Brother Whitfield, and they were still in the glow, the afterglow of the wedding ceremony that took place the day before. Our dear brothers and brother and sister Hugh people were there, and they celebrated with song, and Brother Steve played his djembe drum, and I played piano for them, and we had a great time, and it was great to see you there after my stint. Not going to talk too much about that, but it was what it was. It is what it is, and we are moving forward. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us right here on 360 Info Network, and invite you to migrate over to our YouTube channels. And there's an issue with the Facebook pages, but you can check us out on YouTube in the next few moments. As always, in parting, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and give thanks to Tone Harley, because Tone makes it possible for us to do these broadcasts every week, and we are very appreciative of what he does to link us to the radio audience. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make it a great day. Peace, Cleveland.
Peace, peace.
Peace.
All right, we are exclusively now on YouTube, and as you can see, I've had a few technical difficulties, and I'm the consummate conspiracy theorist. You know, sometimes my concern is that there's a certain level of sabotage that goes on when conscious folk get together. And sometimes you experience these little interruptions in signal and stuff. And I don't think it's coincidental, but we get past them, we move forward, and we say what needs to be said. We're moving into a new era. 2025 is a year that's marked by the number 9. 2025 adds up to 9. And 9 is a symbol of completion. So we're ending an era and we're moving into 2026, which adds up to 10. And 10 is an era of new beginnings. So this is my message to those of you who are watching us on YouTube right now. The most important thing that you can do in your existence is vibrate at a high level. And your vibration at a high level is what will protect you from the chaos and confusion that exists in this world. This is going to be a consistent message that you will hear coming from this direction so that we can elevate those who are capable. And not everybody's going to hear this. Not everybody's going to receive this message. You know, there are so many forces that are operating in our realm right now. We're living in a fear-based reality that is created by those who want to manipulate us into a survival mentality that keeps us away from our ability to think about the things that are important to us and to think about solutions to the problems that they are creating for us. They got this paradigm that they use, problem, reaction, solution. They create a problem, we react to it, and then they provide a solution that serves them and not us. And we have to take ourselves out of that paradigm by operating at a level that keeps us out of the survival mentality that we operate in. So just know you're going to hear this over and over and over again coming from this direction. And my trust, and not my hope, but my trust is that those who are capable of receiving this message will take heed to this message and do the things that are necessary to do what needs to be done. So, Brother Ephraim, I'm going to work on bringing that video possible. And if you would like to summarize once again for the folks who are just joining us online, the mission and the purpose of Africa House International, and I can see what I can do to share that video.
Well, one of the things that I love about being at Africa House International, it really awakened me to my culture. My culture is in my nature. It's in my DNA. I don't have to go somewhere to find what's in me. It's in me. You know, my DNA has so much memory strand in it. So scientifically, this is one of the things I really appreciated about Dr. Willie R. Mackey, in which I've never met him physically. But I met his wife, and I met him through his wife. She gave me his insight and showed me all his work. This was a powerful scientist. And the thing that I'm so
Today was day 1 of our 5th.
Go ahead, brother.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, you could go ahead and play that harvest. That was the day 1 of our Harvest Fest, and I can finish up after that video. I
okay.
think I uploaded like 3 different videos, but that's one of the good ones.
Okay, here we go.
Annual 3-day Harvest Fest. We have tomorrow and Sunday.
Jen Giles. I work for Western Reserve Land Conservancy. I'm our community forestry coordinator, and today we're out here planting some trees in the Huff neighborhood. So we're on Linwood Avenue. We have 3 sites that we're planting today, and tomorrow we're planting another site down the road with Africa House at the Linwood Garden. We're adding these trees to our GIS system, so that way we can keep track of how tall the trees were when we first planted them. And then since we come back and do maintenance for the next 3 years, we try to keep track of that just so we can kind of measure their growth and see how happy the trees are. That's all. We've got a bunch of volunteers out here today with us because it is the kickoff of our 10-year anniversary. So we've had 10 years of planting trees in the city of Cleveland, and we're celebrating our success out here.
So yeah, that video, like I said, I'm a videographer. So being able to capture and produce videos that have a storytelling narrative on it helps people see our work and the things that we do and the relationships we have. So like I said, the relationships come from doing business. Now, one of the things I can say is Akusika is grounded in the Huff community, and she's a great artist. The work that she does,
What we do again at the Fête du Jour.
So that right there was a combination. That's Ladosha. She's very close to the African community and culture. That she stands up legally, and she's wrote up the Crown Act, and it's going through different cities being approved. I think it's just got approved in Cuyahoga County as a county. You know, I think it first got approved in Cleveland Heights. So we went downstate and met with state legislators to identify the importance of not being discriminated based on your image and on your hair texture, because that's a part of our culture. And if people are not allowed to be themselves, who you want us to be? You know, it's like you don't have that choice with us. We're who we are, and you don't have the right to tell us what you want us to look like. Now, don't get me wrong. Ain't no one supposed to come in here looking crazy. You got to keep your value system up. But culturally, using Black excellence, we are a artistic people, and artistically, our taste in our images, especially our women, like to keep themselves groomed, So ultimately, I think we're in a great space in America right now. Everyone's showing their hand, showing who they are, showing their natural being. And, one of the things that I think that is being challenged is the same force that was pushed on the Black nations as far as shaping and trying to make us into another lens or another frame. I think the pushback has pushed back. And now I think it pushed back so much that now other cultures are going through the shaping and what should be, which brings us to the point of the civil rights. When a person has a nature that is murderous and, of the devil, they just can't be allowed to work in society with integrities, because they're not going to do right. They're going to lie. They're going to do things, but those things that they're doing are of their nature. But that kind of nature isn't a righteous nature, and it causes more problems than little. So that has its own story. I don't want to go that deep. I know you want to keep us focused here, So it's just being aware of what time it is. Like you said, the completion of that timeline. We don't have to go back through the civil rights to get America into the high spot of its new beginning, to where the humble and the meek are the inheritors of the earth. It's going to tell its own story, because it was written and spoken by our Lord. So,
okay. Since we brought up the video, I want to share this video, and we can talk a few more moments about the Crown Act. I also wanted to take an opportunity to shout out the Golden Ciphers. They're actually having a 25-year anniversary tomorrow. It's going to be at their Development and Cultural Arts Center, Phyllis Wheatley organization, tomorrow from 2 to 6 p.m., October 29th. So be there. I'll be participating in the program, but just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Let's take this quick look at this video, and then we can continue the conversation.
We come to your page for free. What about DJ? Come on, DJ. Go, DJ. Go, DJ. Hey, go, DJ. Go, DJ. Now, is it the official official DJ of the Fête du Jour. You don't call us up trying to get in on this, because this is all her thing, all right? So DJ Danny is our official DJ of the Fête du Jour. It's the last Sunday of every month at your place of business. Call myself, Waverly, or Mr. Latif of Schoolhouse Productions. We provide the flyers. We provide the DJ. We provide the food. We provide the refreshments. We got you faded. The paparazzi is for free, because we say come when you're celebrated and not tolerated. So today we don't want to tolerate. We have a surprise. We're going to celebrate somebody wonderful, magnificent, who's doing great things in the industry.
Okay, that's our dear sister LaDosha Wright, and you don't know, LaDosha is an advocate when it comes to hair, and as you expressed, she's been downstate several times to testify on behalf of those who would like to have a natural hairstyle. You know, we've seen an explosion of natural hair within the past couple of decades. Actually, you notice more people wearing locks and wearing afros, and just wearing what is comfortable for them. And it would be tragic to be in a workplace and have somebody tell you that you got to cut your hair or you got to have a certain kind of appearance that doesn't really line up with your own self-image and your own self-esteem. So kudos to her for her advocacy and her involvement in the cosmetology business. Brother Ephraim, we can move forward with your conversation.
So Colin Kaepernick, one of the things I loved about what you just saw on this video was LaDosha introducing that young lady. And this is a conversation I heard you and Antonio had with Mr. Calhoun about how do we bridge the communications and the relationships and pass the baton to the next generation. And here, LaDosha is introducing this young lady to her fold by hiring her as a DJ. So the main thing that attracts our students I heard piggybacking off something you said earlier in your earlier interview with Mr. Calhoun, Antonio, was drugs. Drugs, when it came back in the 80s, it came with money. And so it was easy for a student to find an interest in something that was going to make him some money. So in this aspect, this is where our students need the leadership of passing the baton, where they have the opportunity to make some money to live their lifestyle or to go into a lifestyle that they want. You can't give our students information and tell them, yeah, this is this and this is this, and they ain't making no money from it. You're not going to keep their attention. That's a currency. So I'm not saying everything has to be tied to money, but it was easy to lead our people in a direction through that kind of mechanism when you allowed them to have money. And then it wasn't just any money. When someone was known as a drug dealer, they made good money. So it's the same thing today. You don't have to be drugs, but whatever you're going to introduce one of these young people into, have a door open for them to make some money with you. And that way they hear you better and they'll stay to it better, because that's the key. Like there's another video here I have loaded up with a young lady that I'm working with I've introduced her into radio personality, TV personality. And she was brought to me by one of my producers, Eric Wilson. And he said, hey, look, this young lady seems like she ready to come into this industry, but I'm so busy with what I'm doing and I see how you handle people. Could you take her under your wing? I said, sure, I can take her under my wing. Let me see what she got. So I interviewed her, brought her in, and then I found a spot for her on Larry H. Gardner's show with Nerve DJs is what they with. So I connected her with him as a co-host, but they have an interview coming up next week, I think, with Justin Bibb, But the thing I'm saying is, in between the work she's doing, she still comes to me for lessons on what brings in the money in this industry, how do you carry yourself in this industry. It's just a lot that she's getting from me, along with her work experience with that network over there, which they have the contract, and I have a contract with someone in the network. But however, that's how it happens, you know. And I explained to her, I can't do no business with you unless we do contract, you know. So that's something that most of our professionals in business in Cleveland don't realize. You can't do business with Clevelanders without a written agreement identifying what the terms are and how things go, because through different stages of trauma or areas where we haven't been developed or things that wasn't brought to us properly, we're not trained to do business. So you have to guard what you're doing in business by having written clear agreements and having the commitment by signing. So if there become any discrepancy, you have a legal document that can identify and spell out where things did not complete themselves or match where the agreement was made.
Yes. The contract is the language of business. And I would like to support what you're talking about in terms of entrepreneurism, because the model that we have dealt with and have followed for so long is this idea of going to school and getting a job. And going to school and getting a job puts you in a position of enslavement. And what we should be teaching our young people is to become entrepreneurs and to speak a language that involves those contracts that provides protections for both parties. It's not just one-sided, it's a two-sided document that provides protection for both. We're living in a world of artificial intelligence and a transition to an internet-based entrepreneurism, as opposed to the previous model that was sending people to schools to get jobs and to fall into the trap of a mortgage, a car note, utility bills, property taxes, and all the debts that people live with until the day that they transition. And many times the debts that they incurred are left with those who come after them, particularly when you talk about student loan debt, because they don't retire student loan debt. If you have children, then your children become responsible for the debt that you didn't pay as a student. That whole paradigm is a setup for failure. But when we encourage our young people to become entrepreneurs, to have businesses, and give themselves the ability to be responsible for their success and not leave it into the hands of someone else, then we're creating a paradigm that will enable them to create intergenerational wealth so that they can facilitate resources and they can develop passive streams of income, which are all possible because of the internet. So again, bringing this back to the idea of culture, which my brother Antonio was extremely connected to, we got these 7 principles. We have cooperative economics. We have collective work and responsibility. When we practice these principles, then we enable ourselves to enjoy the successful lives that we deserve and the realities that we create for ourselves, and not the reality that is created for us. And I want to invite Brother Antonio to comment before we move forward.
Yeah, well, you know what direction that I'm going to come in, and
Of course,
as far as that conversation is concerned, and backing up and just making a comment when you talked about the Crown Act, I believe it's just amazing to me that you talked about the 9 to 2025, that we are still fighting for freedoms. We are still having to explain ourselves, and we are still looking for a voice. 2025, we're still fighting on some of those battles that we did in the 60s, you know, and that ain't working. I mean, it's taking a lot of time. We on this hamster wheel, spinning our wheels off of the same stuff. Now, one of the things that I would just like to say for us to be careful on, and we can teach our young folks business. We can teach them how to do all the right things that in order for them to operate in this paradigm that we are in. Now, that is good, and you need to do that. But I think just as important, or even more important, is the consciousness. It's the consciousness of why you're doing the things. We got to be careful not to just develop more of the same to where we're at. You know what I'm saying? The same type of consciousness, the capitalist consciousness that is taking us down this dark road that we are on right now, because we still asking for these freedoms and things. So we don't want to just make better capitalist people in this country. To me, this is my opinion. Now. To me, I think we almost like we have to have a purpose, and culture gives you that purpose of why you're doing those particular things. Even when we got into contractual agreements, that's a European thing. That's never been an indigenous thing, because your word was your bond. And when you said you was going to do something, you did it. Now, I'm no fool. I understand we have to work in those realms of where we living at right now. But I'm just saying how culture plays a big part. So I think if we make sure we work simultaneously in teaching them this entrepreneurship, that we tack them consciously on why they're doing the things and the works. When you achieve that point, you got to have that. I mean, when you achieve that point of owning your business and things of that nature, set it up on a cultural, communal type of a diagram of understanding on why you're doing it. Because when you get into that cultural framework of entrepreneur, then you start looking and seeing what's needed out here, and you work together. Like, you know, everybody ain't gonna sit up here and open a business. I mean, a beauty salon or a rib shack or this. That you're gonna work and get complementary things to develop and to build up the community. And once you are conscientious, you understand, okay, you're doing this, go, let's work together. You do this part of it, I do that part of it, and we got an old African village, or we got an African-American cultural community working together and not against each other. When you establish the type of consciousness that I'm speaking on, you know that and you understand that, and you're not working against yourself. You're working in the best interest of everything and everybody. So we just got to, you know, when we dealing with our kids, we got to understand that, you know, we got to still really got to tack their conscientiousness as well.
Yeah. And just to support and embellish what you're talking about, I think that consciousness comes with the sense of purpose. When you're living in a sense of purpose that's tied to that cultural identity and the understanding that you live to benefit others, then you'll be involved in something that enables you to live within that purpose, provide that service or that product or whatever to someone else, but also allows you to enjoy a certain level of success so that you can create and develop resources that will support you and your family. Like we said at the top of the show, it all comes back to family. You know, you use the example of creating those hats. You know, you create a hat so that somebody who has issues with the receding hairline can feel good about themselves when they walk out in the community. You know, you provided a self-esteem benefit to them, but at the same time, you developed a stream of income that allows you to support your family, but also allows you to be involved in philanthropy. It's not about just making that money for you. It's about creating those revenue streams so you can support those who might be in need. So we have to think holistically, and I think culture is the thing that ties all these pieces together. So let's talk about Africa House International, Brother Ephraim. And I know you've got this business and you want to share these videos, but we only have so much time. So I want to talk about these things before we conclude the show.
Did you want to go into? You kind of talked a little bit extensively on that. Did you want to hit on the museum at all? Or?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's talk about the museum.
Okay, yeah, you said Africa House. That's what. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
My
So there's
apologies.
an ad I have right there. If you can pull it up, I think it's the first one loaded up there about the event that, since we're speaking about culture, I think they have a presentation on the culture of Ghana and the culture of the Ivory Coast. That's
Did
going.
that one already happen, or is it?
No, it's 2 more Saturdays, including today. So there's a flyer there. If you would pull it up for people to see. It's probably towards the beginning. Yeah, there you go. And it's free admission. So it's called Ghana 2025. You know, come watch the evolution of the new Ghana through video and photography. You know, it's free admissions from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. today.
Okay.
The museum is open. It's free admission. And, you know, the thing is, we always ask if you can donate, please donate, because the museum is a great area for gathering and protecting or preserving culture, you know, moving forward. So our board has been making adjustments, and things are coming together really nicely to where we're engaging more with the community and providing resources like this one with the Ghana 2025. You know, I'm thankful for Frances Caldwell staying active and the things that she does to keep things moving over at the African American Museum. I thank the founder, Mr. Fluellen, Ichabod Fluellen, for his vision and his connectivity in the preserving and reestablishing of culture. Our people, all you need is that memory, you know. Once you get that memory of who you are, and you have yourself aligned with all the good principles, decolonized, not colonization. I'm talking about, you know, having your own nature balanced. So once the culture comes to you, you become yourself holistically, you know, and that's what's important, you know. Now, don't get me wrong. I've learned many things from many different cultures, whether it's European or whoever, because I'm in life, and life is about learning and application of what you've learned. So practically, you know, these are the things that sustains our village or our community practices. You know, practice makes perfect. And one of the things that I believe that will help our village become more unified is more people doing more purposeful work intentionally and getting better at it. You know, and realizing, like you say, with the hat, finding your purpose and how your purpose connects to someone else on a quality level where they feel good about making a purchase from you, and how you treated them during the transaction and building that relationship. You know, everything is about relationships, or would I say family? Like you said, Vince, you know, family is a key. But business goes above family, you know. I know you said contracts came from Europeans, so I see marriage as a contract. And I don't believe that marriage is something that's European, but marriage is a contract. And I think that's a contract with God. So I think contracts are just a sustainable way of record keeping, so that when people hundreds of years from now want to know what happened, here's a document that's preserved that can tell the story. And if you want to know exactly how the story went, read the document that was agreed upon, and it can tell you all the terms of what happened. Now, if they kept their terms or not, that's one thing. But what was discussed and what was agreed upon is written right here. And you know, everyone don't always state their contract or their agreement. And this is why you got courts and people going to courts, and you know, it's just the way of life.
Way of this system, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's the way of order. And the thing is, you want to handle people through civil behavior. and civil behavior being able to produce the actual documentation or activities that has taken place, and being able to sort out a resolution or result. This the people fall out all the time about things.
Yeah, but see, that's why the culture dictates policy on everything. When look at all the structures and things that we have built all over the world. Wasn't no piece of paper contract there. It was culture. It was a way of life. Everybody had their part, and they wrote, and their word was their bond. The artisans knew what they was doing because it had a purpose. It had a purpose to elevate the community in several other ways. You know, whatever the structure that they was doing represented themselves. You know, if it was a religious temple, it was a communal temple, or whatever it is that they was putting together, everybody understood. And everybody understood the purpose, and that particular entity it was very purposeful. That's all I was saying. So, but then the group itself would understand and lay out those guidelines, or lay out the transaction, or what actually took place. You know, in their archives, in their oracles, they would tell the stories about what happened. The people got together, did this and did that. You know, everybody did their part. But you know, we also have to understand that me and Dr. Whitaker, we talked about it last week, that we all been brainwashed. We all been brainwashed into thinking and understanding the way we do something is the only way to do something. You know, but our ancestors did things in a different way. And I'm not saying, you know, but I just wanted to throw it out there to make folks understand that how we operated was a little bit different than how we operate now. And we can get stuck in that and not seeing that there is another way to do something. You know, Vince, like we talked about the kids in Japan on how they go to school. There's another way to do something, you know. And so we don't necessarily, because we don't have our own, because we have a bastard culture, a reactionary culture and a way of life, and been in survival mode and fear and all this time, we adopted. And just like anything else, I think Dr. Whitaker said, we could take something bad and make it good, because that's just how we are. We can do that like that. So we operate in those constraints and in those guidelines as well, and do well with it. But we always got to be conscientious of the people and why are we doing it. If is what we doing uplifting ourselves and our community, that's what I think is the message that we should be putting out to our kids. Okay, I'm gonna start a business or whatever, but how does it affect our community? You know, and how, you know, and what I'm bringing, and I'm paraphrasing, it was something that Horace Mann said. I was listening to a video where basically he was saying that, you know, what are you doing? Your life is a shame if you ain't do nothing to help the positiveness of the world and the community. What did you do in your lifespan to help the community move forward? So if you didn't it, you lived almost a life of shame. He you know, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, so that's pretty much what he's saying. So that should be our mission at this point.
I want to invoke Ichabod Llewellyn, because you raised his name and you talked about his vision. And I know that there is a slight controversy about what he left behind. The things that he collected are our connection to the success of our ancestors and the evidence of what they did and what they accomplished. And I'm just wondering, in the evolution of the museum, if you are moving towards using it as a museum space to display the things that he left behind.
So I can appreciate that. So looking through what they call frames and lenses, depending on what frame things are in and what lens you look through, it kind of like shape the way that you see things. You know, one of the things that we know as a board is that we need to raise several millions of dollars for how we envision the museum through an architectural design needs to look. we have a whole new plan for the museum. And when it comes to that museum being developed, of course, we are looking at the preservation of the artifacts and things that were brought in through Ephraim Abdullah, as well as other Africans that have precious items in other museums on display and having them curated here. So yes, doing the business of it, that's something that we have to prepare Cleveland's African American Museum through our process of doing business. You know, so when another African American museum sends an artifact here, we want our museum to be aligned with the other museum institutes here in Northeast Ohio or throughout the world, to where things can be protected, things are signed in properly, because a lot of the things that come in are insured and they have a historical value to where they're well worth several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And having an artifact curated over to you in the capacity for a display or a series, there are a lot of documentation that has to be aligned and signed and agreed upon based on handling these materials. And these are the things that bring our museum to another level of operation that may have been there before, I'm not sure, but it needs to be there in order for us to see the success that we are trying to present to our community, for them to learn the many different cultures and the history of those narratives, you know. So it's a blessing to have the team that we have. It's a blessing to have you all in the community, the greater Cleveland community, that we're able to meet and bring together in an alignment the navigational process that does the business that needs to be handled in order for our museum to get its full respect and perspective, and other institutes that are in the Black community. It's our responsibility. Yes, I'm very happy about it. One of the things that, you know, I like what you're saying about turning something bad into something good. It's all about getting a better understanding, seeing it from a clearer frame, and realizing the natural lens of things. You know, like a lot of people think slavery was a bad thing. And I would beg your pardon, because what I see that took place in what they call slavery, it began as servitude. Now, all the horrific things that took place in the South, or should I say the Confederacy of America, you know, those were some bad situations that those guys just, that's who they were, and that's how they ran things. They were human trafficking, and they were just criminal people by law. The North was never that. Ohio was never a slave state. You know, you have to realize who you are as a participant in the process. You need to know the narrative. And I can't let someone tell me the narrative. I have to study and realize what actually took place. You know, so there was the South and the North, and the big war was against two Americas, the Confederacy of America versus the United States of America. We both had Republicans. We both had Democrats. We both had presidents. Their only president until Donald Trump came was Jefferson Davis Jr. Our president at the time was Abraham Lincoln. The South came to the North and killed our United States of America president because they were upset about the ending of slavery, which they were making money off of. So that's the thing right now, the Civil War that we're looking at right now, they're planning on repaying the United States of America for closing their country, the GOP, the Confederacy of America. They felt that we all, the United States of America, closed their economy by ending slavery, which wasn't a thing that was by our own opinion, but it was the necessary thing to do because it's illegal to traffic human and do the things that they were doing that brought what we were giving as servitude and made it into a slavery thing where, a person was captive, So these are things that when God told us to come and serve here, it was an honor to come and serve. We built that White House. We were trying to serve people in our restaurant. This is our restaurant. And what our job was to teach you civilly how to behave in this type of society, which they did not understand at the time because of the nature in which they come from. I mean, this story is just a beautiful story of people being obedient to God. You have to think, why did so many Black people claim their inventions back then, but at the same time allowed others to use what they invented and to profit from it? But they claimed it, and you can go back to back and see how many Black inventors claimed their inventions. So that's that servitude I'm talking about. We developed things and then allowed them. This is a Bible verse. Let us make man, and let us give them dominion over everything. So we were being obedient when we were doing servitude, just like today when you got a mayor or a senator, or those are public servants. They volunteer to serve, even though they're paid for it and all that. Still servitude is what it's supposed to be.
Well, Brother Ephraim, I have to respectfully disagree on some of what you stated, because when I look back at history, I look at racism being implemented in the North and the South. Our brothers and sisters migrated from the South to the North, thinking that they would come to a certain level of freedom that they couldn't experience in the South, and they came to a Chicago that was a racially divided city, and they had to deal with the implication of racism, just like they came through Ohio to get to Canada, and they encountered people who had racist mentalities just because of the differences in the color of their skin. We can look in biblical terms and look at the idea of the chosen people, and we can think about those brothers and sisters that left Detroit and Chicago and went to Dimona, Israel, under the understanding that they were the chosen people of God. So there are so many layers to what we've expressed here. But I think the bottom line is that we look at history and we find a way to liberate ourselves from the conditions that we have endured. The fact of the matter is, we were the first people on this earth. The fact of the matter is, even throughout all the bondage and enslavement and all the difficulties that we face as a people, we as Africans in America have proven that we are the strongest of the strong. We have proven that we have been in situations where we were self-sufficient and we thrived just because of our connection to the Creator and our ability to take care of ourselves. So I agree with some of what you said. I don't agree with all of it, but that's the beauty of discourse and the fact that we can have disparate opinions and still be congenial and still be brothers and not have any malice or any ill will towards each other because we don't see things exactly the same way.
Well,
And I want to come back to something that I meant to mention earlier as we were talking about the financial aspect of the museum. I took a trip to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, back over the weekend of April 4th, which happens to be my birthday. And on the next day, the 5th of April, I visited the African American Museum in Philadelphia. And what I found out when I did my research is that the city of Philadelphia provides $800,000 a year in funding and support from a line item in their budget for that museum. When I talked earlier about having funding for the arts in this city and having it a part of our municipal budget, I think that it's only appropriate that we think in similar terms. Now, what you talked about in terms of the needs of the museum is not just $800,000, it's in the millions, and it's our task to be creative and find ways to do that. And I know with the new reshaping of the financial system in this world, there's opportunity within those paradigm shifts for us to generate the capital that will allow us to make the money that's necessary to do that. And perhaps we can have a conversation offline on how to accomplish that, because I don't think it's fruitful for us to necessarily have strategic conversations about what we can implement so that we don't have folks all in our business and attempting to sabotage us in our efforts. But I agree, we have to be creative. Brother Antonio talked earlier about the African American Cultural Gardens. Same situation. We shouldn't have to go begging to these philanthropic organizations when we have the resources within our own community to complete that. We're talking about $2 million, people. $2 million that exists within this community if everybody contributes what they are capable of contributing. You got folks who live in this city who are millionaires. They can cut a check for $10,000 or $20,000 and claim it on their taxes and not miss a beat. You got people who will spend $100 in the bar drinking brown and white liquor. You could sacrifice one night in the bar and contribute $20 towards this cause.
Well,
but we have to find ways to connect with our people so that we can become self-supportive and self-sufficient to bring the visions that we have for the things that are important to us to light.
You got to look at the fact that this current administration has presented an area to where cultural preservation is a high need for our communities, and it's just a business. You have to look at it from a business point of view, at what's going on and how things are, being diminished and have been diminished, even with the museum in New York, the removal of Black history items and things like that. These are areas where cultural preservation is definitely a line item of discussion. So I appreciate what you're saying. I will be happy to have a discussion with you offline to where, communications lead to things.
Yes, absolutely. Before we depart, I just wanted to mention Superior Renaissance Community Development Corporation. Can you talk a little bit about how it was formed and what its mission is and what it has been able to accomplish in the time that it's been in existence?
Absolutely. So that's Minister Roland Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, who's been a leader for the Nation of Islam here in Cleveland for several years. He had a vision, and he decided to act upon what was given to him from his Lord, our Lord, that there is not identity for citizens of Black communities being direct Cleveland or greater Cleveland that have a facility or a place or a location that preserves our culture to where you can go and be yourself at. He identifies it that every nationality pretty much have their own communities, Asian town, Greek town, even the Italians have Little Italy, but there's no area that promotes our preservation of culture, something that we've talked about on this whole conversation, and the institutes that I'm affiliated with that would help highlight, the proper presentation of culture by being in practice of our businesses. So, you know, to have a band of businesses that work together to enrich our youth and give them purpose, give them a visual of how it should look, or what does it sound like to talk to a entrepreneur in your own community, like we used to have back in the day, when you can walk up Huff Avenue, Hayden Avenue, where the Black communities were, and they were flourishing with Black entrepreneurs. A kid walking home from school can step in and directly talk to the business owner, to where today, when they walk home from school and they stop at a facility, they're talking to a foreigner. And a lot of times the foreigner isn't friendly to our Black citizens, because a lot of us don't have the culture to have a relationship or a communications with anyone to talk about doing business without it becoming something that has in the past shown to not be as healthy for our citizens. You know, it's best to, you know, if you can have someone who loves you like your own village, that could be available, working practically on their job, entrepreneurship, showing or sharing their experience with a student, giving them something to dream about or to look forward to, or to guide them, or to even give them a job. You know, these are the things that are the basic fundamentals that are missing out of our local based community, are entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs that are accessible for our youth to come and enjoy a service, a product, as well as get some information from someone that looks like them, to inspire them to do for themselves.
So can you talk about the development that has taken place with the CDC? Is there a building that has been constructed, or am I on the
So the
wrong
first,
track?
well, the first building that Minister Roland Muhammad has operating right now is the actual CDC, which is on 110th and Superior. He also runs his bakery out of it's 3 or 4 storefronts there, to where there's his bakery there where he bakes his bean pie and other cultural items. And then you have the studio area there with Player T, who does the show, Player T. His studio is there. And then you have the end corner area where the CDC actually have their events and meetings at. So that was a development for them to get the structure aligned to where the CDC can have a facility where now they have an area, a brick and mortar, to where they can engage with the community, bring the community out, which they've been having events. We've been really interacting with different leaders, trying to really get our action plan structure together, to where it's a step-by-step process, which has been fairly successful, moving through and putting the right people in position that understand the process of what it needs to be. So it's a growing process.
So what's the future plans for the piece of real estate over there?
The future plan is to provide land and opportunity for professionals in our race who are interested in being in a Black community, Superior, Renaissance, and African American.
So like office space too, like that'll be a part of it.
So the thing that we're looking at is development of office space, storefront rental, actual full development, you know, where a person want to come in and maybe leverage the use of the mixed use transformational dollars to build a building from the ground and become a partner. You know, there's opportunity on that strip for development. And, you know, councilman there, he's been developing a couple of different properties over there in which he's had some ribbon cut. He had a ribbon cutting already. And I think he's just announced another property being developed on that strip. So it's a process of relationships and developments and being able to see the vision of bringing that income capability to the right resources of leaders who are buying in to the African American community and becoming a part of that fabric.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying my last comment. And if you got the ears of rolling there, I don't know if it's on the drawing board, but I would like, me personally, I would like to see some type of marketplace, African marketplace, something maybe once a month or something, where a space where vendors can come out and commerce can take place in that particular area and things like that, you know?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been happy to share is that I've been working with Little Africa. They've been identifying, bringing a co-op market space and a situation of that sort. And, you know, there's things I've seen those young ladies go through where people had the funding and promised the funding, and at the end of the day, they went a different way. And, you know, for whatever reason, I'm not saying anything about someone here nor there. I'm just saying when it comes down to doing business, everything, like I said, contracts, you have to put contracts in place, and then you have to, you know, get those that are identifying that they have that interest and that investment. You know, you just have to give them an opportunity to fulfill what they have to offer and make them feel good about what their investment is. You know, I like what they've done over in on 105 on the Opportunity Corridor with Myers. You know, I saw that process, you know, how they're leveraging the use of dollars from immigration to bring in those type of developments. But these are savvy businessmen who are not they're not sharing with the common the things that they do that makes a business move savvy. And that's their prerogative, you know, but it's our responsibility to I got me a little blinking light going on right here. It's our responsibility to take the initiative to find professionals in our communities. And that's one of the things I'm thankful for, being in the Nigerian community, because I have a relationship with James Sosa, who's been doing historical preservation projects, and he's doing one around the corner from my office now, where he's garnered about $12 million to restore a building over here off of 79th and Cedar. And the work is looking good. He's done work in Shaker Heights. He's been doing programming. So there's a lot of great leadership opportunities for people in our culture to do business with other business people that are in our culture and some of who are not in our culture. It's about doing business, and that's a practical thing. It's not a college mindset thing. You can't come with the idea, I think I know what I'm doing. You have to be practically on the ground doing work, to where when a person looks to do a relationship with you that involves doing several $100,000, several $1 million, that you are practically aware of what's needed and what's necessary from your post, your position, to carry out that function. You know, and that's where in our community we need more professional purposed help, people who in our community who understands what they need to do integrity wise, Black excellence. You know, this practice makes perfect. If you're not doing the work, how are you going to know how to do the work? You know, I used to cut hair in my own salon. And I used to cut hair, a full head of hair, shampoo it, line it up, crisp, out the door in 15 minutes. And people used to sit there and watch me just whiz through these cuts. I don't care what kind of cut it was. And I would get a person perfectly out the chair in 15 minutes. I was charging $25. I call it the deluxe cut. So I was doing 4 cuts an hour, which is $100 an hour on haircuts, you know. But in order for me to get there, I had to practice that. I had to learn that. I had to put me a system together that when I cut a person's hair and then I send them to the shampoo bowl and then I start cutting another person's hair, you know, being able to keep my equipment clean based on state board certifications, you know, practices of safety, keeping the consumer protected, and keeping my facility running where I'm not running out of supplies and doing things. You have to know what you're doing. So when it comes to development, doing community development, you got to know what you're doing. And when you get into relationships with people who know what they're doing and you come to have a relationship with them, they know if you know what you're doing based on how you're speaking and what you're doing. So it's not a part of we don't have the opportunity, or if it's not no money. We need qualified people who are practically positioned to come and do what they say they know how to do.
I want to jump in and just invoke the word opportunity and rewind just a little bit before we conclude the broadcast, because we've taken up a massive amount of time, but we've had some very fruitful and constructive conversation. First point that I want to make goes back to the Superior Renaissance CDC, and the idea is to develop from East 105th Street to East 125th Street based on what's on the website. I want to inform the public that there is a marketplace near the corner of East 105th Street and Superior where Black business is taking place. There's a space there where there are vendors, African-American vendors. They're selling produce, they're selling plants, they're selling information, oils. So this is something that is taking place right now. So it's not a matter of, can we do this? It's a matter of something that's already being done. So if you go down East 105th Street and you go south of the Key Bank building, right next door to that property, that marketplace exists.
Near Church Hill, I believe the name is street or something.
Might be that. The second thing that I want to talk about is the opportunity corridor, because you brought up Myers being there. And the fact of the matter is the construction of the opportunity corridor, it mirrored the construction of other thoroughfares that divided African-American communities and were not necessarily beneficial. This corridor from I-77 to essentially the Cleveland Clinic is just a corridor that allows the biggest employer of this city to provide access to that property without requiring them to drive all the way up to I-90 and Route 2 and get off MLK and drive into the clinic properties there. So I just want to shed light on that, because I remember the initial conversations that we were talking about the opportunity corridor, and they were talking about all this opportunity that would be provided to us, when in essence, it wasn't opportunity for us, it was opportunity for them, and for them to pursue the businesses. Now, it will be a different thing if there were African-American businesses lined up to create benefits or businesses in that corridor. But essentially what it did was it divided our community one more again, and now we're paying the price for the liberties that are provided to those employees that take advantage of this new thoroughfare for them. With respect to the Meijer that's there, the Meijer that's there serves our community, but it also serves the development of the residential properties that are being constructed in that area right now. So if you go up Stokes Boulevard, you'll see the balloons next to the new residential property that they built there. If you go further up the hill and you get to where Fair Hill and Martin Luther King goes off to the south, you'll see a brand new residential property that has been built there. And the fact of the matter is, even though the Cleveland Clinic is a nonprofit corporation, you seeing bricks and mortar go up, and you're seeing this island that's created in the periphery of the areas that we live in that are not served by those dollars, the areas that we live in where there's trash on the streets and there's a lack of the desirable and the necessary attention to those cities that aren't, to those communities that aren't being served to capacity by the city of Cleveland because they're spending their money on public safety and not on the people. So I just want to set the record clear on that. Yes, Meyer is there. Yes, Meyer is providing a benefit to us who drive past the east side, the new east side market, to go to Meyer so that we can get organic produce that they're not selling in the new east side market, partly because we don't purchase organic produce at the new east side market, which is why they abandoned the sale of it, because it was just sitting on the shelves rotting. So I don't want to put all the blame on, you know, our vanilla brothers and sisters, because it's not all them, it's partly us. But it's also because we are failing to educate ourselves about the things that will allow us to exist in a better state of health and consciousness. And we need to have these conversations about our food supply, which is why an organization like Little Africa Food Co-op is so important and why we need to support them. Last week we had Michael and Veronica Walton on, and Veronica made me aware of the fact that she was vending in that place, and I could go to that place at near 105 and Superior and buy some produce that I've been able to enjoy over the past week just because we had that conversation. So I'm saying all that to say that we have the resources, we have this platform, we can bring this information to the attention of the people, but it's up to the people to take this information and use it in a way that will benefit them. We're doing our part, and it's up to you who are listening, who are viewing, to do your part to elevate yourselves and to vibrate at that high frequency that we spoke about. So much that we can talk about, but Brother Ephraim, I thank you for joining us today. I thank you for sharing the things that you shared with us today, because now we have a greater perspective on the mission of Africa House International. We have a greater perspective on the vision and the mission of the African American Museum. We're in a position to support the programs that are taking place there. And we also have an understanding of the vision of Superior Renaissance Community Development Corporation. So I thank you for being the guest. I thank you for what you shared with us. And I look forward to having additional fruitful conversations with you. And yes, we'll have an online or an offline conversation about ways that you can leverage the current state of the financial reset in a way that will allow you to raise the capital that will bring your visions to life. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And Brother Antonio, I'd like to give you an opportunity to express whatever you feel is relevant in terms of a final thought before we button the program.
Just bring it to the forefront that, you know, our culture and our consciousness is tied together, and we have to feed both of them in order for us to prosper as a people. You know, you have to, you know, like what did the last poet say? Free the mind, and the behind will follow. You know, so I'm a believer of that, and I'm a believer if you feel better about yourself, you'll do better about yourself, and you automatically understand what you need to be doing. And lastly, we have to raise more people with the type of consciousness that understand that they will pass 10 other businesses in order to do business with one of their own community, and even willing to pay a little bit more for that item because they understand the big picture on why they're doing it, you know. So we got to raise more of those type of people.
All right. Well, let's do that. One last reminder that we are on YouTube right now, and we thank those of you who have been with us for the past couple of hours. We really appreciate your patronage. We encourage you to subscribe to our channels. You can subscribe to the Journey with Antonio on his YouTube channel, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. Brother Ephraim, I invite you to send me those links that you spoke about, and I'll make sure that I include them in the description for this video so people will have access and easy access to your content. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, everyone.
Peace, peace.